All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Kitchen Table Podcast where business gets done. I'm your host, Ken Baden, and today we were with Mr. Doug C. Brown because I see the C in there. Is that you prefer that?
Yeah, I actually do because Doug Brown
Okay.
actually is a professional hockey player, and people.
I was gonna say Doug Brown. I feel like it could be a lot of people, and he's a professional hockey player. So Doug C. Brown, Mr. Brown, how are you today?
I'm awesome, Ken. Thanks for having me on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure to have somebody of your stature on the podcast. And I just got off with one of your coaching clients, Sam Wakefield. Shout out, Sam. We were on the call before this, so I know that was you coach Sam, correct?
Yes, yes,
Probably one of I don't know dozens of high level entrepreneurs that you coach.
yes. I would agree with that statement too.
Okay. I know you've done a lot of really cool things. I've been catching up with a lot of your social media and just super impressed with you've got a crazy list of accolades and just stuff that you've done. Probably one of the most diverse backgrounds that I think I've ever seen. So, because we could go one way or we could go a total another. But relative to our audience in the home improvement industry and the home services space, I think we'll kind of just stick with what's relative. But first and foremost, man, thank you so much for coming on. How's everything? How's life?
Life is good. Life is good. It's funny. I just recently had I would call it a health scare, and
Mm.
I was like, I wasn't feeling well for about 35 days, and I went to the doctor and they ran my blood work and it came back like normal here, but somewhat abnormal too. And they were questioning, uh, did I actually maybe have something that was very serious, like, pancreatic cancer or something like that. And so it really made me, now I don't, I actually got the results
All
today.
right,
So
good.
I
Thank
was
God.
like,
Hell yeah, today.
yeah, right.
Oh, so we're feeling good today.
It's because I'm on your show.
That's right. That's right.
Oh,
That and the fact that you don't have cancer, so that's pretty good too. That's
yeah, yeah,
beautiful,
yeah.
man.
Yeah, but it does make one think, right? About, especially with something like that, because that's not a long-term life expectancy. That's like,
Right.
30 days to 6 months, right? Type thing. So it really does make us, or made me think about, what's super important in life and what's not, right? And you know, I guess, there's an old country tune, or it's old now, I guess, probably 10 years old. And, it's called Live Like You're Dying. I hope you can live
That's
like you're
right.
dying or something, right?
Hmm.
And that kept ringing in my head. So, a lot of the things I'm like, well, we'll do this next year. We'll do this. I'm like, nah, we're doing it this year.
Yeah, yeah. We're doing all those things this year. Tim McGraw, live like you were dying. Yeah,
Yeah.
man. And I
So
think that that's great. It's kind of that's so cool that you got that news today. First of all, congratulations. That's awesome. You
thank
know,
you.
that's awesome. But I do think that those types of things, I mean, it's just such a cool like mindset shift I don't want someone to have to go through that, but like man, to get to go through that and then not have the thing, like you get a fresh perspective, you know what I mean? Like you just said, now you're like, no, we're gonna go do the things. And I think that's such a blessing when people get a chance to do that, man, and not have to go through the horrible thing that made them think that way. So that's awesome. I'm very happy for you, man.
Yeah.
Now,
Thanks. Appreciate it.
relative to the business world, Doug, you've done a ton of stuff. You have an awesome resume, but I have to ask you because I'm going to ask you. One of your many background attributes is a connection to Mr. Tony Robbins, which is like the godfather of I don't know all of our stuff, sales, NLP,
Yeah.
all of it. You know what I mean? So, before I go too far, because I had to ask, man, I'm a huge Tony Robbins fan. So, like, what was that like getting to work with him? I mean, and you weren't just like some guy in a room. What your official title with him was? Well, I'll let you answer that. What was that like? What'd you do? What'd you learn? All the
Well,
above. I'm
yeah.
really curious.
I mean, the official title is president of sales and training, right?
Yeah,
So,
that's
so
not some guy working in a mailroom.
No, no. I actually I had 166 people reporting to me, and what was it like? For me, Tony was one of my mentors on well back on cassette, right?
Yeah.
For those who people who can remember cassettes, but so went 8-track cassettes, CD discs, and now where we are today. And I'm very grateful to the content, because I mean his content actually really took me from a place where I was really questioning a lot of things in life, and I went through the whole personal power to all of the a lot of his courses, and it really changed my focus on who I was, I guess, at the time, and who I was aspiring to be. And it kind of gave me grounding and sense of purpose. And then it's kind of really weird how this all came together because what happened was, so to answer your question, it was awesome working with him. And I still listen to Tony today and his wife Sage, and and it was to me, it was really interesting how it came about, because it was part of me actually focusing on what I wanted to do from doing his personal power.
Okay, I was gonna say, how'd you make that happen? I mean, did you just know somebody, or you utilized his techniques, and then that kind of?
I didn't know somebody at the time, and so what ended up happening was, the first time I met Tony, I actually was in my telecommunications business, and I sold this massive account, international US account. And this company was so happy, they invited me to the Biltmore Hotel in Arizona, to come to this training, like a 2-day training, all expenses paid. And they said to me, we're also going to be raffling off, out of the 100 people that are invited to this, a brand new Mercedes-Benz. And I said, okay, I'll take the, I got a 1 in 100 shot. So long story short, I went down there. And what I didn't realize are the 2 guest speakers for the 80 people who showed up. Number 1 was Harvey McKay, wrote a book called Swimming the Sharks. Number 2 was Tony Robbins. Mm-hmm. And so while I'm there, there's 80 something people in the room, and I'm there and Tony's right there. And I'm like, this is so cool, because he's like, almost, I would say at that time in my life, like almost superhuman, He was just Tony Robbins. And so I'm gonna talk to Tony Robbins. I'm gonna go up there and talk to him and tell him. And as soon as Tony got done, he started, thanks, appreciate this. And he started exiting the stage. I went to get on stage. He had 2 huge bodyguards with him, and they were like, no, Mr. Robbins is leaving the stage. And he took off on the stage, and went out in the back. And then I'm like, man. So I'm expecting, to see a helicopter pick him up and take him back to California or wherever he was. And so I get out of there, and I'm walking through the Biltmore, and in the Biltmore Hotel in Arizona, Scottsdale, Arizona. I was talking to somebody on the phone, and I said, yeah, I didn't get to talk to Tony. And they go, oh, that's too bad. And I said, well, I got close enough that, and as I'm walking by there's a courtyard in the middle of the hotel. And I look to the left, and there's this big man sitting there drinking a glass of water out in the courtyard, and he's talking to somebody. And I said, I think I see Tony Robbins. And my friend goes, I know what you're going to do. I said, absolutely. So I walked up to Tony and I said, hey, Tony, my name's Doug Brown. Back then I didn't call myself Doug C, because nobody knew me back then. Now they do. But I just want to tell you a story of what happened, and it changed my life. And he goes, Doug, sit down. And so I sat with Tony, and he had a high school friend he didn't know was at the Biltmore. They met, and they were just having a beverage. And I sat for about maybe 15 minutes with Tony and his friend, and we just like talked. And I told him the story, and we started joking. And to me, Ken, is the fun part. So Tony then, I made him laugh out loud, and he reaches around and he whacks me on the shoulder. And it was like, man, it was like a club hitting me. I mean, he's a big man.
Because he's huge, right?
Yeah. That guy's like, he's totally like, if we took a picture, he'd be the world's tallest man, and I'd be the world's shortest guy, in the Guinness World Book of Records picture, so to speak. because, now at this age, I'm 5'7", right? So he's, but he punched me in the arm. So I got to punch him back, right? I mean, that's just what guys do. So I hit him back. And when I hit him, it was like hitting cement. It was like thud. And so he invited me to come to one of his events as a guest. And I did. And, there's a lesson in this for everybody who's selling home services. So I went to his event, but he said, call my assistant. She'll take care of you. And she did. And she's very nice. So what I did is I went out and I ordered a large bouquet of flowers, and I sent him to his assistant saying, thank you for being so professional and helping me. I really appreciate it. And so I'm at the event. There's like, I don't know, 5,000-6,000 people at the event. Tony Robbins is up on stage, and he looks out from the stage because people want to take pictures with him, especially toward the end. And he looks out and he sees me in the audience, and he goes over the intercom, over the microphone. He goes, you. He goes, you come here. I want to talk to you. And I'm like, uh-oh, I pissed off Tony Robbins somehow. Right. So, and I know what he's going to say to me. And so I'm walking down out of the audience, and he goes, I know what you did. And I'm like, Tony, what? He goes, do you know what you did? I'm like, Tony, you don't always like send large bouquets of flowers to your assistant, validating how wonderful they are and how much you appreciate them. And he goes, that was a really good stroke. And I said, well, thank you. Well, at that time, I just had started entering the Chet Holmes industry. So Tony actually invited me to something else. And
that's brilliant, by the way. I'm sorry. I just had a comment on that. That's really slick.
Yeah.
I hope you guys are paying attention to that, because that was an extra little, make sure I get a chance to get the most I can out of this interaction with Tony. That's awesome. Sorry.
Yeah. And the lesson for people that I hope they picked out of this is you got to stand out of the crowd of 5,000 something people, right? You've got to do something that's not just different, but that's something that differentiates you. And so I, at the time, had helped a man named J. Conrad Levinson, who wrote a book series called Guerrilla Marketing. And he introduced me to a man named Chet Holmes. Chet Holmes wrote a book called The Ultimate Sales Machine. And I was starting to coach for Chet's company. And I became the #1 producing coach in his first 4 months. I was selling $65,000 a month in coaching at that moment. And Chet was like, what is this kid on? Like his average coach was selling $10,000 a month, that type of thing. So I quickly started escalating up through Chet's organization. What I didn't know at the time was I was building a relationship with Tony Robbins and building a relationship with Chet Holmes, but they were in discussion to merge companies. And so when they did that, we all met in Las Vegas, and Tony walks into the room, and here I am sitting there, right? Now I'm at a boardroom table, Ken, of maybe 40 people. And so this is how the relationship kind of built from that point. Then what I ended up doing within their company is I ended up really blowing out sales records. So, I took their percentage closing rates from 17.8% to 43.2% in 4 months. Wow. And it never came down the 7 years I was there. That generated tens of millions of dollars. I ended up improving their front end sales close rate from, what was it? It was, originally it was reported to be 22%, but then I figured out that the sales managers were actually reporting inaccurate information. So it was 12.7%, and I got it to 21.2%. And so that boosted that. So I boosted the front end of the machine, the middle of the machine, the coaching part of it, helped with the consulting divisions. I mean, literally the company grew 10x while I was doing that. So, when you do that type of thing for Tony Robbins, other people, take notice, if you will. And that's what kind of kicked all of this training and all of the consulting. And I had companies like I've done Procter and Gamble, Enterprise Rent-A-Car. CBS Television. I worked with the president of CBS Television. CBRE, Richard Ellis, which is a very large real estate company, globally. I worked with their France office, and all of these like amazing stuff was happening, all because I sent a bouquet of flowers and was networking my way into the right thing. And the power of relationships. And this is where I think a lot of people in the home services miss it. Like, I just, in the building we're in right now, I bought this as an investment property. We ended up moving into it, but we dumped into this property probably close to $400,000. And we had multiple contractors in here. We bought new windows, new doors, new roofs. We gutted the place basically and rebuilt the place. And do you know that not one of those people who came in, we put solar on the building, not one of those people, despite me saying, I know a lot of people, asked me for a referral. Not one of them.
Wow.
And, and not one of them has followed up with me at all. And so, am I a bad guy? No, I paid my bills. I did this. And so, if people want predictable revenue, they got to do predictable things, really, when it comes down to it. But yeah, that's how I met Tony. And that was kind of the journey. And it's kind of interesting because people, when you do something for somebody who's that high profile and you do the right thing, it's crazy how many people reached out. I mean, I worked with companies called E-Myth, Deepak Chopra, Brian Tracy, the Ask Method company,
name a few,
another company that was 110 million that I can't say who they were because I'm on non-disclosure, but I started with them when they were 48 million and we built them into 110 million in 2 years. And, I was the president of training and sales for those guys. So it's a duplicatable, repeatable process that I figured out, even long before I was there, but when you do things like that and you get notable clients, people don't exploit that either. And that's a big problem. Like I never understood, realtors, home services people, anybody in the trades business or professional sales business, like, why wouldn't you, if you sold somebody in one neighborhood, why wouldn't you go through the whole neighborhood, the whole block, right? And especially if you did a great job and everything was wonderful, you have that familiarity and that reference. Now, if you helped, somebody with a notable name, like, I had people that like the founder of 1-800 Gut Junk, we see them on TV, Brian Scudamore, super nice guy. I tell people that I know Brian,
right?
Because it opens up other doors. The founder of Braxton Industries, Thomas Dorley Jr., super nice guy. His company's called Deloitte right now. So like when I mention that, it opens up doors. So why would people take what they're doing? If you want predictable revenue, again, I'm going to keep saying this, you got to do predictable, systematic things.
And in this market too, we were talking about this before, but that's a super cool Tony story, not Tony show. That's but even more impressive is what you did internally in those companies. I was listening to those numbers. I'm like, holy hell, man! No wonder you're, where you're at. So selfishly, I'm like, I wonder. I mean, I don't know. I wonder if there's have you ever tried to apply your systems to, something like a home services space or solar or roofing or any of those types? I mean, have you ever worked with businesses, in those places? You have?
Yeah. I've actually worked with over 352 industries at this point in my life. So, I'm an older guy, right? I mean, I was in there doing this. I've been doing this type of thing for, darn close to, formally in this capacity over 30 years, like 31 years. Right. So, but yeah, so here's the thing. I look at businesses to me are all the same. They just, when it comes to growing revenue,
right,
they just have a different product or a different service they're offering, but business all runs the same. Money in, money out equals something. Loss, break even, profit, right? And so the more we can take that formula and tweak that formula, and look at the things that improve revenue and what's not systematic, what's not predictable, the more we can do that, then it really, I have found in almost every case, it doesn't matter the industry, because business all runs the same. We sell something, we have a cost of, a cost of, delivering that, whether it's cost of goods, a cost of service, operational overhead, all of that is figured in. And what I have found is that most people don't look at the math and the metrics in the business and let the math and the metrics determine what they should do next. They're not following. Well, you and I in the beginning, we were talking about, the data will reveal itself on a project you're doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and so, yeah, I have worked in the home services business quite a bit. I've helped the roofing companies, concrete companies, construction companies, roof, windows, I'm trying to remember them all, flooring companies.
Windows,
yeah. I've done it as we had the Hawaii floor company. We had, what is that? Long home and fence. So, that was a pretty good size one. We did that.
You helped them?
Yeah. Johnny DePalma and the family. Yeah.
That's a Maryland company.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly where they're located.
One of their, they're kind of like the big wigs that we'd like to be. One of, he actually is a mentor of one of my mentors, who's, like a top 25 remodeling company. Like, and I would argue like just under them. And then you kind of have us. You work with them. Okay.
Yeah. I originally coached
It's
him.
CEO sales strategy. So, I mean, is it going in more so, Doug, to the businesses as like in a consultative, like hands-on, or is it more coaching like the CEOs that you're into these days?
It really depends on the situation, but I love advisory work more so than
Yeah.
but it really depends. I mean, I have taken companies and, restructured the whole thing, gone into sales and just, pulled through scripts and pulled through processes and, just got very hands-on in that process. And I've coached, all kinds of businesses just on like advisory type of work or coaching type of work. So, because not every company needs consulting, not every company needs coaching, and not every company needs advisory. It's like what is the need, so to speak. But I mean, I've rewritten company SOPs. I've rewritten their sales processes. I'm big in helping them find things like ideal right fit buyers, so that their messaging lands better, their prospecting lands better, their conversational selling lands better. What I find a lot of times, Ken, is that there are usually a few optimization points that are missing in the process, or they're been so lax for a long period of time, that they've just let things kind of progress. Like when I work with CBS Television, they had a division, it's kind of like PBS. And I'm not under non-disclosure on this, so I can talk about it. But they were trying to sell like they were selling back in the 50s and 60s. And it was like, I had to explain to them, I'm sorry, but things have changed. There's something that came in called, the internet, right?
Yeah.
And now the sales is not the expert channel that people rely upon like they used to back pre-internet, or at least pre-1995 and beyond, right? And so, but they were still under that mentality that they thought they had all the information and that they could, do things the way they did. They could, top down sell versus, conversationally, consultatively sell. And, fixing that, changes everything. Like when I worked with Intuit, Intuit was missing on $100 million division. their messaging to the ideal right fit buyer.
Mm-hmm.
And, once we adjusted that and adjusted the messaging on that $100 million division, they went from a $10 million loss to a $7 million gain in 1 year.
Wow.
Right. So sometimes it's just like a optimization point or 2 or 3 things that are within a company. And, the one I did that was 48 million to 110 million, I rehauled their whole sales structure. And I mean, they weren't doing things like, they weren't training their salespeople. The sales managers were, I'll say, inept. They weren't even there. They weren't even showing up. So, I had to help them restructure and and a lot of conversations with the CEO, because what I find also in part of the process where people get stuck is, really in the mind shaping or the mind flow side of things. Like they have one thing that's like, it's usually something from their childhood that's kind of holding them. This is a lot of what like Tony Robbins does, right? Of course, Tony Robbins, you pay him $1 million plus 7%. That's what I used to know, but I don't know what he is now. He's probably even higher. So I'm a little more cost effective than that for sure. But like even your friend we were talking about, right? I mean, he told me the other day, while I'm coaching him, he has closed his first sale that he got paid in full upfront, in his particular training consulting business. And his mind was set to get payments and payments and payments. And I just taught him, how not to be able to, let's reframe the thought process on that and why it's better for the client to actually pay this way. And now he told me he's got several in the funnel right now that he thinks he's going to close in that capacity. So what does that do for his business?
Paid up front?
Yeah, paid up front. Right. Because here's the thing, when people pay, they pay attention. So a lot of times in his type of business, they'll really take it much more seriously when it's a pay up front component of that. And so the client is very engaged now with him, right? Where other clients, it's like, well, I'm paying a monthly thing. If this doesn't work out, I'll just, I'll cut losses or I'll whatever, right? So it's like, sometimes it's just a commitment thing with people. But what I find is a lot of times we have grown up, and, this is where Tony helped me originally in the process. I grew up in an environment where I was always going to be good, but good was never going to be good enough, that type of thing. So, for example, I originally wanted to be a professional musician. And I would live in an environment where it's like, man, you're really good on, I used to play piano and vocals and all that stuff. And my mother would come by and say things like, you're really good, but you're never going to probably make it as a professional musician because your grandmother was a concert pianist. And you're not a concert pianist. You're really good, but you're not a concert pianist, right? So for years, I would carry that in my head and I would say, oh my gosh, I can't, I'm probably not going to make it as a professional musician. Well, part of my growth in life is I was actually selling music equipment to the professional bands that some people still listen today. Like, I was selling to the, members of the Eagles, Billy Joel's band, Boston, what else? Paul McCartney and the Wings, Extreme, Jake Giles, like, big bands back then, right?
Yeah.
And then one day, the guitar player for Boston said to me, Barry Goodrow, Barry, if you ever listen to this, thank you. Big hugs to you. And Barry said to me, he goes, Doug, you're a pretty good musician. And I'm like, well, thank you, Barry Goodrow, from the #1 album out now called Boston, with the album cover. And I'm like, I appreciate the compliment. He goes, you should go to music school, man. And I'm like, okay, thank you, Barry Goodrow. I'm like, all right. I'm like, well, maybe I should take Barry's advice and I'll apply. I'll never get in. So I lived in, near Boston. So I'm like, I'll apply to Berklee College of Music and maybe the New England Conservatory of Music, because neither one of them are going to take me, right? And on my first interview, Berklee goes, welcome to Berklee College of Music. We would like you. And I'm like, okay, so Herbie Hancock went here, the Cars, like hello, right? And so I help people kind of cross that bridge into the shift into their own business so that they can open up the capacity for more business growth. Because as Tony used to say, look, if you set your thermostat at 72 and, you know, you're going, you know, not doing as well as you want, and your temperature is really down around 65, you're going to turn on the, you know, the juice to get to 72, and you get to 72. But let's say you go to 77, your thermostat is set at 72. So you're now going to kick on the air conditioning and, you know, and just back it right down to 72. And I've watched people over the years emotionally do this. And this is how I've helped many sales teams grow to where they are, is just helping them unlock that type of thing.
Mm. Yeah, that's brilliant, man. So, and that was what I was talking about as far as the music connection. I wanted to bring. I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to mention that. I mean, it's just such a crazy, super diverse background, man. But you know, in the home services space, and you know, a lot of the demographic that we have that we're listening to, and if you're listening to this, I mean, Doug's worked with so many companies that we just talked about, and one that if you're in the Maryland area, everybody knows that company. You know, they're one of the premier companies in the area that we probably all aspire to be. So that's super cool. I'd love to talk to you more about that offline. But what would be the biggest piece of advice, I suppose, that you know, if you had to just kind of like a generalized like blanket, especially that 1 to 5 year, you know, actually let me rephrase that because the current socioeconomic situation, I'll put it mildly, is a little scary, especially in our demographic, in that you know we're a high concentration of government workers, not 3 million laid off. Government's closed down right now, and our market can be a little shaky. And you know, this is just in the DMV, and there's people listening from all over. So the economy all over isn't great. That at the forefront, you know, what would be your biggest piece of business advice from someone such as yourself for us to kind of weather the storm and get through? And do you see anything coming, any reprieve in the near future? Hopefully, but that's two questions, so I'll let you start with the first.
Well, the answer to the first question is depending on what you want, what's the truthful goal? If you want to grow your revenue, grow your business, let's say, right? Right now, more than ever, massive prospecting is in your favor. Because what ends up happening, and I'm old enough to say I've been through these economies up and down before, right? I've did the real estate of the 80s, the prior to that, you know, the inflation, right? I mean, we all know inflation's not, you know, whatever the government's reporting, it's not true. It's much higher than that.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? So, but here's what I find happens. And again, you know, you want to know what your target customer really is, right? Who's the ideal right fit buyer? Because you just don't want to go out and massively prospect and spend money doing that and not be clear about who that is, because then you just end up spending a bunch of money out. But if you understand your, you know, like Long Home and Fence, right? They're brilliant at doing it. They understand who their client is. There's no question about it, right? So once you understand that, here's the premise. In every economy, when people are talking about, oh my God, this is like, it's not like it's so easy anymore. You know, it's like, oh, this is, it's like, well, you know, and interest rates are like 3% and anybody can buy anything. And there's, you know, government subsidy money flying all over the place, you know, like, of course, I mean, it's not hard and realtors, I don't mean any disrespect, but it's not hard to sell a house when you put a sign up there and 43 people show up and they're all trying to upbid each other for the house, right? And they're all pre-qualified or, you know, have cash or whatever, right? So, but now when things are going to, and I personally think what's going to happen, and I could be wrong, Ken, but what I personally think is happening is the government's trying to look at this and say, how do we drop interest rates? How do we drop interest rates? And I think when they start to do that, that's going to kick up the home services business a little bit, because people are going to be like, oh, I'm buying a new house. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. Right. But after that, I think is where we're going to see the poof. That's my prediction. But here's the thing. When people are fearful, they tend to pull back on two things in business, which is absolutely insane to me, but they do this. Major corporations do this. You know, I mean, Harvard University just laid off, a good percentage of their workers. So, but what businesses tend to do is they tend to pull back on two things: sales and marketing.
Hmm.
And to me, it is the kiss of death, because we're now going in to maybe, what Tony would call, he talks about four seasons, right? So spring, summer, winter, fall, right? Um, in a different order. But I think we're going into more of the late fall, early winter, not because we're going into it right now as this podcast, but economically. Well, things cool down and things, die off, but spring will come again. But when people are pulling back on those two things, if as a business owner, if as a sales professional, I now put down the pedal even more and I push forward and I gain more market share, more traction, even if I stay at the same revenue I'm at, what happens when the economy swings back? Because it will. I have been out there building my name, building my brand like a long home and fence. And now all of a sudden, when people have the cash reserves, because they will get them again, happens every single time. I'm old enough to remember when gasoline was 32 cents a gallon. I remember my dad filling up the little 5-gallon jugs when we would go out on the boat. It's 32 cents a gallon. And I was like, man, that cost $1.60. Right? I can barely buy a candy bar now for $1.60, if I wanted to. So
I don't even know if we can.
But if they push down on the prospecting, if they push down on the marketing, if they push down on getting public awareness, if they push down right now on the pedal of doing all of that, their competitors are pulling back. So what ends up doing is it ends up opening the field of less competition. So without knowing their particular wants and desires of their business, if I was just giving global advice at this moment, that would be my piece of global advice. The second thing would be start really working on the mind flow component of this, because the mind flow component of this is going to be what stops people from actually doing what I just said. They're going to be like, oh, this is a little tight here, or this little, and it's one of those things that, and I did learn this from Tony Robbins. There was a gentleman in one of his live events, because we used to, work in business mastery and, all of them, but primarily the business side. And a guy stood up and said, why do I have to learn all this stuff? I don't need this stuff. I just want to have business advice. Tell me how to sell more stuff, Tony, And Tony said, you are your business. He's like, your business performance is directly tied to your ability to be able to think in a way that promotes growth and allows growth in your business. And if you don't understand that, you're likely going to get stuck. I never forgot it. I was like, wow, that was, profound in the day when I was listening to that, him on stage. By the way, those of you who don't know, I would say Tony Robbins is probably the best salesperson on the planet. I've watched him work, on stage. I've watched him work off stage. I've studied some of who he is as a person, and he's brilliant at communications, and that's what it all is about in selling, right? So, but that's what I would recommend, Ken, based on what the question is, based on me not knowing everybody's individual goal.
I love that, and I'm not you, but like maybe you'll back me up on this with my CFO and just some of the guys in the company. I'm like, look, right now, I'm just saying we're one of the few that are up, and we're really blessed to be in that position. And there's a lot of companies, some of the really big ones that aren't and are feeling this right now, and we know this because of our distributor telling us like, hey, there's one or two in our catalog at least that are up, and one of them is you all. And we may not be anywhere near as big as some of these other companies, but the point is there seems to be a lot of market share that's available that wouldn't otherwise be, because they'd be pumping, and like, hey, maybe we maybe we actually do some branding and keep going and not, throttle back because we can, A, and B, we might be able to pick up a lot of this market that is suddenly coming available because everybody's turning it down. So would you say
Well,
that that's kind of what you're getting at? I mean,
yeah,
essentially in a
yeah,
nutshell.
I am. I am. And, and there's always, look, there's steady, predictable growth, steady, predictable business. And then there's sometimes you're in the right place at the right time, you know, but the economy normally, from my perspective, looking at what happens throughout my life, and I look at businesses all the time, it can be the economy actually influences many times, even being in the right place at the right time, like Zoom. You know, Zoom was not Zoom prior to the pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
right? Zoom was in the right place at the right time, and the pandemic caused a shift in our economy. And all of a sudden Zoom proliferates because of this. So sometimes that happens, and sometimes the opposite happens. Like there were a lot of restaurants who were relying on just, oh, come on in here today, that's
Yeah.
good, I'm open, no marketing, no brand presence. Like if I owned a restaurant, I'd be talking to every single corporation. Actually, I worked with Jason's Deli. Do you know that company by chance?
No, I don't.
So Jason's Deli is a large chain of restaurants. It's like a Chili's or a not like that. Jason's Deli prides themselves on fresh food and cafeteria style food. And I worked with some of the locations in Jason's Deli, and they were able to sustain in the market. So I said to him, I said, well, why don't we take one of your employees and let's just call upon every single corporation. This one was in Colorado at the time. I said, every single corporation, every single business within they weren't in Denver, but they were in a large enough city, or small. They had some locations in smaller cities. And I said, we're going to call upon these and we're just going to invite them into the restaurant, blah, 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 blah. Well, business went up almost 30% within the first 6 months, right? And they were like, what? And then they're like, well, what are we going to do? And I'm like, sell more cookies.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, what? I'm like, your cookies are good. People want your cookies, but your people aren't pushing your cookies. So brand yourself as the place to come for cookies, right? You're going to start bringing more parents in. You're going to start bringing more, kids want chocolate chip cookies. Who doesn't, right? And that actually gave them another bump of almost 8% in the process of doing that. And so but they had to get out in the community and build their name, because they were relying on, in that area, Jason's Deli is very well known, right? So, in other parts of the country. So it would be like, our like Sal's Pizza in the Boston area, right? It's like they're at the Boston Bruins, games.
Right.
They're everywhere, right? But they reinvest back into that process. So again, I think it's just one of those things that in this economy, and by the way, anybody who's ever taken this advice, I've been asked this in every, possible turn, or the economy's turning down. Anyone who's ever taken this advice, to date, has always told me this has been something that's helped them grow and sustain through those periods of time.
Well, I mean, I know it's a scary time. I haven't been around enough of this. I've seen up and down, certainly, but I still get a little nervous. But I mean, whatever, man. The rules are the rules. The game's the game. You got to keep playing it. What are you going to do? You're not going to quit.
Yeah, Ken, I think you hit on a good point there, right? It's a game. It's a
Yeah.
game. And whether if you play the game by the rules of what you're talking about, of what, again, money in, money out equals something, right? So if we look at and we say, listen, lead flow plus cash flow plus relationship flow plus mind flow equals cash. I'm sorry, lead flow plus workflow plus relationship flow plus mind flow equals cash flow. Like if we just look at it that way, like if we're constantly bringing in more, leads at a cost effective rate, and we can convert them at a profitable margin, and then we can build relationships out of that to expand the relationship, increase the buying frequency, the transactional value, the upsell, downsell, cross sell, whatever in that process. We can get more out of that, new clients out of that. And then we're conditioning our brains to keep accepting and growing that process. How can that fail? Right? Yeah. It's like you get more cash flow. It's pretty simple.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love the mind flow thing, man. I mean, I'm an LP certified coach myself. I haven't really got a chance to do much with it, but I'm just, I'm really interested in it. I think mindset, all that stuff is just so important. When you were saying like how you had those limiting beliefs about what you couldn't do with being, because of, your mom and then the piano and the music, and just, you kind of held yourself back, and then finally just like, you know what, I'm going to go for it. And I've really tried to operate under the pretense of just like, it's already done. And I really try to watch like the negative self-talk, but I'm telling you, if you're listening to this, man, like, and that's a big Tonyism thing too, but just so many other people have picked up on that stuff now too, man. It's a big, 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 big deal, and it couldn't be more. It's one of the bigger revelations I've had is that stuff's all manifestation, all of it. The power of the unconscious mind, all of that stuff is just so powerful. I would encourage people, if you're listening, to invest in a little more of yourself there.
Yeah, and I would second that and say that the people, like I've had the privilege, and thank goodness I've had the privilege of working with some very, very successful, well-noted, individuals of running companies, corporations, and I can tell you they constantly work on themselves, most of them, because what people don't think is they went through what we're going through at the level we're going through. In other words, like the owner of 1-800 Got Junk never made a mistake. He's just all over television. He just got on Oprah Winfrey the first time he asked, like right, that's not what happened. And by the way, I was told that, Brian had a partner in the business early on, or had, Cameron is his name. And Cameron told me one of the biggest assets that they did were continuously building their presence in the public arena. So PR was one of their major things that helped catapult that company, and they actually wrote a book about it. So, you can find the information. But again, if we don't condition our brain to say, okay, this is what I got to do to be successful, and this is what we're going to do to be successful, then what ends up happening is it just doesn't get implemented in the way that it should, because we're sometimes trying to resolve problems with the same level of thinking that created the problem. Yeah. and
Doug, if somebody wanted to find, and I've been watching a lot of your social media, but where would somebody find you? I know this is like every time I get on with somebody that I selfishly am intrigued, and like, that's not to say anyone else that's been quick or anything like that, but just selfishly, when I'm like listening to the person talk and I'm kind of like into what they're saying, and just, it's hard to keep my attention. I'm super ADHD, but then that episode's always like an hour long. So here we go. But hey, that means it's a good one. I certainly hope, or at least I find it interesting selfishly. But,
thank you for the compliment. I appreciate it.
I genuinely mean that, man. I've really enjoyed this. I hope you guys at home are listening to this, or in the car listening to this, and enjoy it as well. But Doug, where can they find you if they want to follow you, see what you got going on, keep up with what you have, or contact you?
Yeah, I mean, they can, if they want to contact me directly, they can do a few things. They can shoot me an email at Doug@CEO Sales Strategies, plural, sales and strategies.com. So Doug@CEOSalesStrategies.com. If they just want to know a little more about me, just type in Doug C. Brown revenue growth, and I'll be everywhere, I promise, and that's on purpose. If they want my LinkedIn, it's Doug Brown 123. It's Doug C. Brown _ is the Instagram account. hell, if they just want to call me, I'll give them, one of my cell phone numbers. It's
I was gonna
832,
say.
you know, just, just call me 832-549-4836, 832-549-4836.
You
And we
said
have a
that.
newsletter we put out. People really rave about the newsletter. It's at ceosalesstrategies.com /newsletter. Not a big, marketing branding name, but people, I get compliments all the time on the newsletter
Yeah,
content.
I'll
So
check that one out, man. I really like that. I'm gonna have to make sure. I want to get that, so I'll check that. I've got another one that I get from a mentor of mine from somebody who reminds me of you, so I'll have to check that out. You should sign up for that. It's good stuff for business owners. If you're listening to this, Doug, thank you so much. I just one of my assistants just popped their head in and
like,
didn't think I'd still be in here. So, but I'm having fun. So, Doug, thank you so much for coming on and enlightening all of us and bringing all that wisdom to us. I'd love to have you back on if that's possible, maybe in the future. I'd love to see like kind of like spring, man, and like and see where this all goes. But I want to hit you up personally because I'm intrigued. I didn't know you worked with the guys over at Long, and so I'd love to talk to you offline. But this has been awesome. Thank you so much for all your time. And any other parting words of wisdom with the audience before we jump off here?
uh, you know, I guess I'll quote Napoleon Hill, in my own way. The mind can conceive and believe it can achieve, as long as this is mine, as long as you see it through, to understand that things generally take longer than you figure, and they're going to cost you more than you figure in business to achieve your goal.
I can second that, by the way. That was my whole last year. But I can second that. That was awesome, man. Doug, thank you so much, brother. Guys, we will catch you on the next one. Check Doug C. Brown out at CEO Sales Strategies. Thank you so much, Doug, and we'll see you guys soon.
Thank you, Ken.